Hello there! I've got another video for you guys. It is about style and the search for style. I hope you like it, and I'll check in with you after the video. Alright, enjoy. Well, here I am again in my car. You guys are getting the noise added versions of my videos these days because I'm busy. Life is busy and I have to drive, and I figure that while I'm driving I may as well be doing something worthwhile or constructive. So bear with me. I apologize for the extra noise and hope that it's not overwhelmingly sucky. Okay, so today I want to talk about style, and in particular I want to talk about the process of developing your own style and how that relates to larger questions around creativity. So, for me, style is tied to greater questions around purpose, voice, legacy, personal fulfillment in my work, and things of that nature. My thinking around this has come out of some personal struggles lately in relationship to feeling burned out. I've been feeling very tired, very worn out, and very lacking motivation towards anything creative, whether it be in relationship to trying to work on projects for our studio or my own personal work, which is kind of like, my biggest indicator that something's up. So I think I'm actually have been facing sort of a low level of burnout and creative burnout. And I think that kind of is an extension of having worked for myself now since 2005 and continuing to manage a business on top of the stresses of being a dad and a husband and all those aspects of life. It's pretty demanding, and I think that it's started to wear on me. And I haven't helped myself because I've made some sort of discoveries about myself through this process of feeling burned out. And what I've done is I've got all these projects that I've been working on the side. So I've got children's books, I've got a novel that I've been working on. I've been wanting to write a graphic novel. I've been working on some paintings, and also working on a graphic novel with my business partner at Pulp Studios. And all these things are great, but I've been sort of assigning agendas to them where it's like, okay, I have to get this done, and I'm going to be done this at this time. And what's happened, I've discovered, is that by assigning those sort of like hard, fast expectations to those projects, it's causing me to just become extra stressed about them, and they no longer feel joyful to me. They feel very much the same as my work. And so I'm stressed at work being like creative on demand, and then I'm adding these other things where it's like I have to be creative on these too, and I have to get this done. And that just hasn't been healthy or fruitful for me. It's done the opposite. I've found myself basically like locked in productivity and not making any progress on anything. So one of the things that I've done recently to help myself out of that funk is worked on these paintings that have no agenda attached to them other than making something beautiful that I can give to charities that they can use for auction events. So right now I'm working on a piece for the Sexual Assault Center of Edmonton, and I'm going to give it to them, and then they can use it, they can sell it, and that money can go towards the organization, which is like just wonderfully fulfilling and satisfying to be using whatever gifts and talents I have for an organization that benefits, people in need. So that's one thing that I've found I need to be doing, is just doing art for the sake of, art and for good causes without sort of any monetary demands or like I have to get this done to make ends meet. And the other thing that I've done is just sort of changed the way that I use social media. So Instagram is wonderful, but it's a bit of a dangerous place for me. I've always struggled with sort of senses of being inadequate as a creator, and Instagram's a great place to find lots of people that are way better than me and just sort of wallow in my self-pity. and that sort of has fed into my lack of productivity. So while Instagram is great for finding people that I can be inspired by and I can sort of pull from their work to improve my own work and my own understanding of visual language, I need to be careful that I'm not looking at it and getting stuck in looking at their work and being like, oh, they're so much better than me, I'm not going to ever be that good, and wow, look at how much success they're having, and I haven't even published anything yet, and oh, I'm just not good, me. So I have to be careful with that. So I'm gauging my use of social media in those respects. And instead of finding myself wallowing in my own anxiety and fear, what I've been doing is instead I've decided to sort of look at people's work, and if they're very successful and stuff, admire what they've done and pray for further success for them. And then also just sort of look at how I can pull from whatever they're doing to help myself move forward. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I feel like I'm coming out of this funk, and I'm allowing myself to sort of jump from project to project in my personal life, which is allowing me to sort of feel more creative and more excited about work again. I have this sort of like a little bit of ADHD around creative processes, and I need to be okay with that. I think it's important for me to recognize it and to want to move past 90%. So what happens often for me is I'll push projects forward and then I'll stall out on them because I get excited about something else. I often will consider a piece completed when it's at 90% because I'm like, want to move on to the next thing. So I need to be willing to sort of push that extra 10% to get to 100% completion on a project so that they're at the highest level that I can produce. And that's something that I need to work on and be aware of. But I also need to be aware of my ADHD issues with creative stuff and embrace it, and that it allows me to be working on multiple things at once and get excited about stuff and find motivation in those creative processes. So I'm trying to negotiate those things right now. I love the idea of completing a project and having something finished, but I'm also aware that in putting pressure on myself to finish those things and leave everything else, I've ended up just sort of stagnating, because I'll get to a point on a project where it's a challenge for me and I almost need to like remove myself from that process for a little bit and work on something else and then come back to it. And that's okay. So I'm aware of those things and I'm using those as tools right now. So I want to go back to sort of the conversation of style. The painting that you're looking at me working on here in this video is tied to one of my children's books that I'm working on, and I feel that I've started to come to a very comfortable place for me in relationship to the style that I will use for children's books. This piece here in particular felt very natural to work on, and it felt very comfortable. I believe that I've found a pocket that is really my true voice for creating children's book illustrations. And it's been exciting for me to find that. Now, the thing for me that works really well here is I'm using watercolors and gouache, and it's very painterly. I'm trying to lean on my knowledge and understanding that I gained through my processes of going to art school and working on illustration using color theory, tone, and allowing the brushwork to be what it is to push the language of the piece forward, the expression of the piece forward. And I feel like this has been a really great realization for me. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I came to that conclusion, or came to this place. And it really came to me through the process of exploration with the Possum Awesome work that I've done. If you follow me on Instagram, or even if you follow me here, you've seen some pieces around Possum Awesome. That's another property that I'm working on and will eventually do something with. But with that piece, I just explored different approaches to coloring and completing the artwork. And it's just become sort of evident to me of how I like to work, because I have with that work I've just had a sketchbook basically where I've done a whole bunch of pieces and a bunch of exploration and kind of come to a conclusion of what feels comfortable, and that has sort of informed the approach that I'm taking with this piece. And that the important thing to note here is that it came out of play. It came out of just playing with the work. So I want to kind of touch on a few people who, or some notes and some reflections on stuff that I've been absorbing. One is through All the Wonders podcast, where Matthew Winter was talking to Giuseppe Castellano, who's an art director at Penguin Random House. So Giuseppe talks about his experiences when he was in college of trying to find a style, and how as students they were sort of pushed towards finding a style, and that would be what they would use to sort of perpetuate their themselves in the industry and to make ends meet and become successful illustrators. There's always this emphasis on like, you got to find a style and that's going to make you go forward. And he sort of related how for him it was like a 10-year journey of looking at other artists and trying to sort of emulate their way of working and pulling from this and that and try to like make his work look like their work. And it just sort of like stagnated him, and he felt like he was hitting a wall with his creativity. And he said it wasn't until he pulled back from that and got back to just doing what he loved and doing art for the reasons that he loved doing art, that he started to feel freedom to create how he should be creating. And I think that's really a really beautiful picture, and it resonated with me in relationship to my own journey. I think the search for style is misunderstood. I think that we often search for style out of like a sense of utility. So like, I got to find a style that works so that people want to buy it. And it's all like about sort of the end game of like making yourself, whatever, look really cool, and then people will buy your stuff. Whereas I think that style is actually related to language. It's actually related to a deeper part of us where we speak from as creators. And I think that it's a disservice to yourself and to the world to try and emulate other people for the sake of being commercially viable. We all have a language with which we will create, just like we have a language and a tendency with which we communicate. As we create work, our hand is going to be apparent in the work that we create. For example, when I was a kid, I used to love to draw comic books, and I used to try to draw like the comic creators that I really admired. So for example, Jim Lee. I would sit down and I would try to draw like Jim Lee, and it was never really great as a kid, but if I tried to do it now with a sort of more advanced skill set that as I've worked on it over the years, I might be able to get close. And if I practiced at it for a long time, I might be able to get really close. However, you're always going to see my hand apparent in that copying. It's never going to be specifically like Jim Lee's work. It's going to have some of Corey Lansdell in there. And I think that that's essential in relationship to style, right? We can't just think that, if I could draw like that person, I would be successful. That's not how it works. The world needs a Corey Lansdell just as much as it needs a Jim Lee, and it needs you just as much as it needs me. So you need to be working in a way that's comfortable and that's natural to your tendencies. In a larger sense, I feel like style ties into things that are deeper, which is this kind of came to me through reading a book that a friend had lent to me. It's called Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation. It's by Parker J. Palmer. It's a bit of an older book, but it's been very interesting reading it. I'll just read an excerpt from it for you. From the beginning, our lives lay down clues to selfhood and vocation. Though the clues may be hard to decode, but trying to interpret them is profoundly worthwhile, especially when we are in our 20s, 30s, or 40s, feeling profoundly lost, having wandered or being dragged far away from our birthright gifts. So Palmer talks about vocation and about what work we're doing as being something that we need to strive to find what our true vocation is. And I feel like this is tied to style for artists. So the classic concept of vocation is that we're driven by oughts. So we're driven by what we ought to do. You find a job that you need to do just to provide for your family, rather than finding what you truly should be doing or truly gives you life. It's a similar thing with in relationship to style. Like I was just saying, we find a style that we think we need to do in order to make ends meet, in order to be a viable commercial artist. He goes on to say that we don't find our calling by conforming to some moral code. We find it by claiming authentic selfhood. The deepest vocational questions are not what we ought to do with our lives, but who we are. So the question is, who am I? The question is, what is my nature? And in finding those things out about ourselves, we will find our true vocation. And I believe as illustrators, if we find out about ourselves who we are and what our true nature is, we will in that inherently find our voice as creatives. And out of that voice will come our natural tendencies towards creative work. So for me, specifically in relationship to children's books, I feel like I've started to discover what my visual language is, how I'm going to create stuff. That language won't be the same for me when I'm doing paintings necessarily. It might be similar, and I might have tendencies that would carry across there. But I have to be willing to sort of flex in terms of the media that I'm working in. And that's okay. That's kind of a different thing. So I hope that this information has been helpful for you. I hope that there's some knowledge that has been gained through this. And I hope that it gets you reflecting on your own stylistic tendencies. The piece that you're looking at as I finish it, I feel like it's very close to where I would like to be creatively in terms of children's books. And I think that it's exciting for me to feel like I'm starting to reach that spot where I'm comfortable in what I'm creating. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm looking forward to sharing more as time goes by. We'll have some more updates down the road about the IP that we're working on at Pulp Studios. I'll have more updates about the children's books that I'm working on, and I'll also have share some updates around the paintings that I'm working on for charities. So thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best. Until next time, be good to each other. So I'm going to be trying to make my YouTube channel a little bit more accessible. I'm going to be asking you, if you'd like, you can click one of the links on screen to watch a video that you haven't seen. If you'd like to subscribe, please click the subscribe button. And if you would like to leave a comment, I would appreciate it. I will check in with you guys next time. All right, take care.